I'd love for you to describe what longstanding painful patterns are and how we know when we're caught in them. I actually read your book. I was sharing with you earlier. I went down to a retreat with my mom in Mexico and drove down there with her. And what a perfect place to read about longstanding painful patterns with your mother on retreat. And what I noticed when I was reading your book is the repetitive part feels so dominant. Like it's like the same feeling that shows up over and over again. And I appreciate how you're talking about these different angles in, because there's the Buddhist psychology angle, there's the psychodynamic angle, there's an ACT angle, but really underneath it is probably some similar process that's happening for folks when these patterns are getting activated.
Mhm. Yes, I think it's really important to learn to recognize when we get lurked. I hope it sounds as it feels, it's like something slimy coming over us. Let's say we get an email from somebody who disinvites us to their birthday party, or, it's just kind of, it would bother everybody. But if you have this kind of lurp of abandonment or rejection, then it just really can spin you out of your orbit. And so the signs how you can recognize that you have been lurked is first that you notice it in your body. You notice there is this tightness in the chest, or it knocks the wind out of you, or you feel dizzy or nauseous, or your temperature changes, or so that's one. Then deep feelings, and there's often we get on our own case. Why am I so angry about this? I shouldn't be angry. I'm a Buddhist practitioner. I'm in therapy, I should just brush this off. But then there is this fear, and there's this anger, and then there is this shame, and then there is this feeling excluded, that seems just beyond the measure of what seems appropriate.
Often people will say something like you're overreacting. I feel like that's sort of a signal that you've been lurked. Yeah.
Yeah, and then overreacting, that's then often used kind of in a critical way. Don't
Right.
overreact. Or we tell this to ourselves, I'm overreacting. And it doesn't help really. It kind of, it's a second arrow, as they say in Buddhist philosophy. It adds insult to injury, and so that's why when I come to my steps, which comes a little later, self-compassion, self-understanding is really important. But another way to realize that we have been lurked is that we have a trauma response. There might be a nightmare, there might be intrusive and ruminating thoughts. We circle around something. Maybe we feel even a little dizzy. There might be a bit of dissociation, this feeling of, wow, this is unreal. I feel kind of unreal. Or there's a sense of generalization. It's like, ooh, are all my neighbors now looking at me the wrong way? So there are many signs that we have gotten lurked, and oftentimes it helps to notice it, once we hold it with compassion, because then it doesn't feel so out of control. It doesn't feel so mysterious. It doesn't feel so unreasonable.
And when we can start to kind of put a name on it and see the familiar lerps that show up over and over again, that's the repetitive part. It gives us a little bit of distance from it. We can look at it, we can do something with it, as opposed to just being fully engulfed in it.
That's right. And I noticed that, I've been teaching about this, gosh, since I was teaching at La Casa de Maria, maybe 10, 15 years ago. I don't know exactly when I came up with the word. Maybe around 2010. Yeah, that's when I really came up with the word. But uh, it helps to notice there is a thing, that's happening. And then I noticed that some of my colleagues, even some of my esteemed colleagues, started to use the word.
Mm.
My Jungian analyst friends who teaches all around the world started to use LRPs. I thought, and I heard from my clients, he said, oh yeah, when you told me about LRPs years ago, and I thought, this is actually not a bad word. So it was more that I realized that hits the spot in terms of describing the feeling and what the feeling feels like.
As we enter the holidays and people are around family, or even just having memories of people that aren't here anymore with us, I think that forgiveness is one of the most challenging things to do. So how do you work with people around these painful resentments to move towards freedom and forgiveness?
Yeah, and I think it's difficult. It's such a hot potato, it's so hard to touch because I think the idea of forgiveness has been often misused as be a good Catholic. That's what I learned, or be a good person, be polite, it becomes like this obligation we are not ready for. And maybe some peer pressure, or some pressure of our religious communities or whatever. And so how can there be authenticity? And what was a game changer for me was this little book by actually Jack Kornfield, The Art of Loving Kindness, Forgiveness, and Peace. It's a little book, but it's really worth its weight in gold. And from him, I learned that forgiveness it's not really something that we grant the other, we do the other a favor by forgiving them, that it's really about us. I even have this little quote by Jack Kornfield, which I find just says it all. Forgiveness is letting go of past suffering and betrayal, a release of the burden of pain and hate that we carry. And that was a real important insight for me, that I was carrying the pain of my resentment.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot about, the 2 years in an orphanage, about my relatives who didn't really acknowledge me as worthwhile or whatever it was, and so lots of years of therapy there. But I realized I was suffering from my own resentment. They didn't really care, or it didn't matter if they cared or not, but in my case, they didn't really care. So I was stuck with the resentment. I was stuck with the pain and the hurt and the shame and the whatever I was feeling. And I quite frankly got tired of it. I just wanted to be free. And that's the message of the Buddha, is that one of freedom. We want to be free. I think we can't prescribe it to us. We can't press the button and flush it down the toilet. Okay, now I forgive. We have to be ready for it, but we also have to be open for it.
Mm-hmm.
And as we are open to forgiveness, it's like cracking the door a little open. And then it happens much quicker than we think. And oftentimes the hardest one is to forgive ourselves. Why was I in the wrong time, in the wrong place? Why did I walk that evening through the park? When somebody jumped on me, or maybe why did I say this? Why wasn't I smarter? Why was I, whatever it was, why didn't I stand up to my boss? Or did I stand up too much to my boss? So it's like, whether it's our fault or not, it's important to at some point let go of that grudge.
Yeah.
And let go of that burden, and then we are more free for something new to happen.
It really is a grace that comes to us. And there's sort of like, the first step is, am I willing to forgive before I actually have to forgive? I can just maybe be willing to forgive, and then maybe the forgiveness will come.